I want to welcome everybody here, including my old friend Ed Redian. Hi, Ed. This panel really doesn't need an introduction, so I'll say very, very briefly from right to left or left to right, doesn't make any difference. Jane Harman, very, very prominent former member of Congress, president, the power really at the Wilson Institute, and a good friend of Israel for many years, head of the Intelligence Committee at the time in the House of Representatives, Professor Shlomo Avineri, Israel's most senior political historian and political scientist, super journalist Judy Miller, Dan Kurtzer, who has been involved in several administrations with formulating Middle East policy for America, former ambassador, both to Israel and to Cairo. You say to Israel and not to Tel Aviv. I'd like it to have been in Jerusalem, but it's still Tel Aviv, unfortunately. And our very, very great ambassador in Washington, Salai Meridor. Our subject is U.S. future policy towards Israel and the Middle East. So get out your crystal balls, please. When you put the question to most Israelis and to many American Jews, though perhaps fewer than before, the wording of the question would usually be, which candidate is better for Israel? I'll explain later on why this question is not really terribly relevant. The question we should also ask, which is very relevant, how's the next Congress, especially how's the next Senate going to look after the coming elections? I certainly won't express an opinion about candidates. As you know, it's a well-established Israeli tradition not to express any preference for a candidate. But before we address the future, we should first, I think, consider the past and the present. And there's no better place to start than with the so-called Obama doctrine, or Jeffrey Goldberg's string of interviews with the president in the Atlantic magazine. A pretty amazing document, and it sets out in writing, black on white, many of the principal points in what Obama really believes with regards to foreign policy. Tom Friedman wrote, I quote, as one can learn from the interview, he, meaning Obama, more or less hates all the leaders of the Middle East, including those of Turkey, Iraq, Syria, Israel, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Jordan, Iran, and the Palestinians, end of quotation. The main question Goldberg puts before his readers and himself is the following: whether August the 30th, 2013, when Obama decided not to act against Assad after he had crossed Obama's own red line, whether he brought to a premature end America's reign as the world's sole indispensable superpower, or the day he peered into the Middle East abyss and stepped back from the consuming void, end of quotation. There are other important issues, of course, such as Obama's general disdain for the principle of credibility in foreign policy, particularly credibility backed by force. One of the underlying, I would say, principles of American foreign policy from Truman onwards, which Obama calls a fetish. And others, certainly including both allies and enemies of America in the world, and particularly in the Middle East, are concerned by these statements because we and our neighbors see the traditional policy of America in that regard as a basis for our feeling of security and international order, keeping more or less stable in the Middle East. There are doubts in Obama's mind about what constitutes American vital interest, and so on and so forth. Now, President Obama considers himself an internationalist, but as Dennis Ross said the other day, he is a minimalist internationalist, unlike Hillary Clinton, I think, for instance. And then, of course, there's the Iran deal, which Obama considers as his crowning achievement, but one cannot look at all this without being a bit wary about the conclusions from Jeffrey Goldberg's analysis. So what has all this to do with the question of US future policy towards Israel in the Middle East? Well, it does have to do a lot, because there is in America's foreign policy an element of continuity. Not legally, not necessarily binding or committing, but it's there, notwithstanding which party the new president or the new administration belong to. With regards to the official position of Washington and Jerusalem, for instance, the Green Line, settlements, etc., there is basic continuity from Nixon to Obama, not excluding Reagan or George W. There may be different degrees and points of emphasis, but the basic approach has not changed, nor will it in either a Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump administration, and Israel's policies in this regard must take this into consideration, not necessarily always abide by it, but certainly not ignore it. The positive aspect is that experience has shown that given intelligent diplomacy, disagreements do not always have to lead towards confrontations. I think one has to reduce fronts of confrontations to absolutely vital and necessary issues. One very important principle in US policy towards Israel has been, through several administrations, recognizing Israel's right to defend itself by itself, including what this implies with regards to Dimona. There were worries about that at the beginning of the Obama administration, but fortunately they have not materialized. And I assume there will be continuity in that respect as well, as I believe that there will be continuity with regards to other security-related aid and cooperation, in spite of what we heard today in the news. And I, for one, see no advantage in postponing the signing of the new security agreement to the next administration. Now, because of this element of possible continuity, the judgment and the opinion and the impressions which we have from the present and the past may have a very important impact on the next administration, whichever it will be or whoever it will be. And I think with that we shall start.